Hello and welcome back to the Darkest Dungeon mod spotlight. Today we'll be taking a look at the monk created by Hellintz with the help from several other fantastic people from the community to provide translations. Through years of training in a far-off land, the monk has achieved mastery over the vital force of ki. Using this power, his blows reverberate through his allies, restoring their energy. The monk is inspired by the monk from Diablo 3 and Kharazim in Heroes of the Storm. He is a mid to frontline healer / damage hybrid. Many of his abilities buff other abilities, encouraging mixing them up in order to make combos. He heals himself through certain attacks and self-meditation, and heals others through crits, ripostes, and transferring his health to them. To begin, let's take a look at the monk's stats. His greatest strengths are his above-average speed, his disease resistance, and he comes built in with 10% protection at all ranks. So he gets a little extra value out of all of his healing, and he can more easily shrug off the effects of small attacks, whereas larger attacks have comparatively a smaller difference. If you're taking, 1 or 2 points of damage, that's going to get reduced by 1 point. But if you're taking a hit for 10, it's still only going to take off 1 point. Some of his other strengths are his above-average dodge, his blight resistance, and his debuff resistance. On average, his crit, his damage, his stun, bleed, and move resistance, and his trap disarm are all about average. His only real weakness is his low health, and considering he likes sitting in positions 2 to 3, sometimes even in the first position, that's something you actually have to consider. Without a lot of health, there are times where he will get chunked to low health very quickly, and you have to be able to handle that. Now, after playing the monk for a while, I think he has a really cool moveset. Many of his abilities buff his other abilities in different ways, so choosing how you want to lead each fight is really important. So to begin with, his first skill is Dragon Tail. He can use it from positions 1, 2, and 3, targeting positions 1, 2, and 3 of the enemy team. It's pretty flexible. It moves him forward 1 position. It has a 0% damage modifier, just does his base damage. It does have a pretty high crit mod, starting at 6% and going up from there. And when he uses it, he gets a buff that gives him 10% crit with other abilities for 1 round. So if he uses Dragon Tail over and over, he won't get that crit bonus, but if he uses it and then a different attack, he can get 10% extra crit, which is pretty substantial. The monk's second attack is Howling Fists. He can use this in positions 1 and 2, targeting positions 1 and 2 of the enemy team. It moves him back 1. It has abnormally high accuracy, starting at 100, where most abilities are at 90, 95. It has a damage modifier of minus 20%, but it does have really high crit. 10% is higher than most skills. I don't know many skills that have like 10% crit. When he uses it, he heals himself for 7% of his max health. Then he debuffs his target with 110 to 150% debuff chance to lower their protection by 20 to 32% for 2 turns. And it buffs the damage of the monk's other skills by 25% for 1 round. So, again, if you use Howling Fists multiple times in a row, you're not getting that damage bonus. You have to use something else. The easiest combo is, of course, just Dragon Tail and Howling Fist. Move forward, move back, heal yourself while boosting your crit percentage and damage of each ability in sequence.
The space between worlds is no place for mortal men.
The monk's third ability is Iron Mountain. He can use this from positions 2 and 3, and it hits both positions 1 and 2 of the enemy team. It moves him forward 2, so it's always going to move him to the front of the party, exposing him to a little bit of risk. It has a damage penalty of minus 40%, which is, about expected for an attack that hits 2 enemies. It's not too bad. It does have built-in armor piercing, so even though enemies in the front lines are often the tankiest, he can break through those high protection targets and do a moderate amount of damage. It has a 110 to 150% chance to knock back both targets 3. So it's not bad to target the frontliners with this, and if your move skill chance is high enough, you might be able to displace one or both of them and bring the backliners to the front. It is one possible strategy. When he uses it, you clear all corpses, and he debuffs himself for 20 dodge and 10% protection for 1 round. Now, of course, since he has 10% protection built in, that 10% debuff is always going to be a penalty to him. It's going to make you more vulnerable, and the dodge especially is pretty bad, since then he can't dodge anything. He's taken full damage. It's a little risky, but Iron Mountain is a pretty strong utility skill with pretty good damage on it. The monk's fourth attack is Sweeping Kick. He must be in the first 2 positions to use it, and can only target the first 2 positions of the enemy team. It has a damage penalty of 50%, but it has a 100 to 140% chance to stun your target, and a 100 to 140% chance to debuff your target for 5 to 7 speed for 2 rounds. And when he uses it, he buffs all of his other skills for 15% damage and 7% crit for 1 round. So this is a pretty good way to take a target out of the fight for quite a long time. Not only are you stunning them for 1 round, having their speed drop so drastically means that even when they come out of speed or come out of stun, they're going to be so slow that they're still probably going to act last, giving you ample time to get control of the fight and kill them. Plus the buff to your other skills, 15% damage and 7% crit, is pretty good. You can pair that with, Dragon Tail or Howling Fist to do some pretty serious damage. It's just an all-around improvement to your damage output. The monk's 5th ability and his first healing ability is Transfer. He can only use it when his health is above 25%. He can cast it from any position, targeting allies but not himself. He heals for 1 point at min rank, up to 3 health at max rank. Additionally, it heals 20 to 25% of your target's maximum health. However, this costs the monk dearly, suffering 5 to 8 points of damage, but as a consolation, he gains a heal over time of a value of 1 point for 1 round at minimum rank, up to 2 points for 2 rounds at max rank. So you take some upfront damage, and then you heal it back over a couple rounds. But it's still not going to put you back where it was. You're going to need some other healing. And then you debuff your dodge by 10, and your protection is debuffed by 10% at minimum rank, and it scales down to no protection debuff at maximum rank for 2 rounds. The monk's second healing ability is Mantram, and this is one of my favorites. This is really cool. So he can use it from positions 1, 2, or 3, targeting all of his allies but not himself. He heals them for 1 point at min rank, up to 2 to 3 points at max rank. He gives them 20% protection for 3 rounds. He buffs Howling Fist, which, to remind you, is his self-heal. Howling Fist heals for an additional 2 to 4 health. At higher ranks, Mantram gains additional bonuses that are not shown right here. At higher ranks, he gains a buff that makes all of his skills heal 1 to 2 health more, except for Mantram. At higher skill ranks, it also makes Dragon Tail heal for 1 to 2 health, which, to remind you, is this skill. So even though it doesn't have a heal now, at higher ranks he can use Mantram, Dragon Tail, and get a little health back. However, when he uses Mantram, he gets some debuffs. He lowers his dodge by 10. He lowers his protection by 10. And his stress healing received is reduced by 50%. Then he gains a buff to get 100% crit on any skill except for his Riposte. However, his damage goes down by 40%. So, in this way, you can use Mantram and use one of his attacks, and he gets a guaranteed crit. It's going to have reduced damage, but obviously, since it's a crit, it doubles up to, a reasonable amount of damage. And because it's a crit, he stress heals himself, though he heals for less, and he heals his party. But additionally, I didn't cover this quite yet, but whenever the monk crits, he heals his party. So when you use Mantram, you heal everyone for a little, buff their protection, and then the next turn he gets to attack, gets a crit, and heals them for a little bit more. So I think it's just an awesome ability. It doesn't heal a lot up front, but overall it does boost the survivability of your party quite a bit.
A time to perform. A singular strike.
The monk's final ability is Inner Fire. He can use it from any position, healing himself for 0 to 4 points at minimum rank, up to 0 to 8 points at maximum rank. Like the Occultist, he always has that chance to heal himself for 0, but usually you're going to get at least something. However, Inner Fire is much more than just a self-heal. It has a 67 to 80% chance to heal himself for 5 to 7 stress, and it activates his Riposte at a 45% damage penalty, and as he ranks it up, the penalty is reduced to a mere 25% damage penalty. Now, we need to talk about the Riposte specifically because it also does quite a lot of things. Whenever he ripostes, he has a 240% chance to debuff his target's stun resistance to Sweeping Kick by 50%. So, only to Sweeping Kick, but otherwise 50% is a pretty significant debuff. And he debuffs them to have 15% crits received chance on Sweeping Kick for 2 rounds. So it helps set up Sweeping Kick if you want to get stun, if you want to stun an otherwise high resistance target. Whenever he riposts, he also has a 70 to 90% chance to heal all allies for 2% of their maximum health. Now, unless they have 50 or more health, that's just going to be 1 point, depending on how the game rounds, I guess. But if they have increased healing from any source, they might get more. Or if the crit itself heals. Or if the heal itself crits. Additionally, the Inner Fire buffs the monk's Iron Mountain by 33% damage with a 67 to 80% chance for 1 round. And he has a 50 to 67% chance to buff all of his damage by 30% for 2 rounds. So, Inner Fire is a pretty good way to lead a fight as long as you are trying to heal up a little. Getting a 30% damage buff is pretty good, and having the riposte up means you can get a little passive healing out on the party if he is attacked. Now, the monk actually has a couple pretty useful camping skills. First, he has Cleanse. For 4 time points, he heals 1 companion for 15% of their maximum health. He removes Blight and a disease, and their mortality debuffs. So, if they have a disease or they hit death's door, this could be a pretty good way to bring them back. Otherwise, if your party's healthy, you're not going to need it. His next skill is Acupressure. For 3 time points, he gives a companion 4 speed and 10 dodge for 4 battles. It's a pretty significant buff, only for 1 companion, but you could give a pretty slow hero a nice bonus to speed, like the Leper or the Crusader. So how you use it is up to you. His next skill is Tranquility. For 4 time points, he heals himself for 20 stress, lowers his stress received for 20% for 4 battles, and he removes any mortality debuffs on himself. Well, if you're having problems with stress and you hit death's door, then yeah, it's a pretty cost-effective skill. If not, well, then it's probably not worth the 4 time points. And his last skill is Conviction Mantra. For 4 time points, he has a 50% chance to give the entire party 15% damage for 4 battles, 50% chance of 7% crit for 4 battles, and a guaranteed 15% stress resistance for 4 battles. This is... It could be feast or famine, Sometimes a lot of people will get the buffs. Sometimes no one will get the buffs, but at the very least you'll always get that stress resistance. And on average, everyone's going to get something, and it's a pretty valuable camping skill, I feel. I'm inclined to use this more often than not. It seems pretty powerful. Now for some other information about the monk. As I said, his bonus to critical strikes heals other party members for 3% of their maximum health, and it buffs his crit by 5%. And of course, keep in mind, his riposte can trigger this too. So sometimes, if you activate his riposte and he takes a bunch of attacks, he might get multiple crits, and each time it buffs his crit by 5% and heals his allies. Now the self crit isn't going to last very long, but you might get another solid attack in on your next turn. The monk has a unique virtue and a unique affliction that he always gets. When he is virtued, he gets Epiphany. Without going into the details of every single thing about it, it's your typical positive virtue. It has, a nice medley of buffs attached to it, and it has chances to heal or stress heal the party. When he is afflicted, he always gets Karma. Karma has the typical medley of bad penalties, but as consolation, it buffs his protection by 15% and his max health by 20%. So his protection will go up to 25% just passively, and his health will go up to, a reasonable amount. That'll actually put him at a normal amount of health. But you don't want to be in Karma. The penalties are pretty harsh. It guts his resistances, his damage, and his crit. It's just his survivability that kind of goes up a little bit. When you have the monk at a party, you cannot put another monk in the party. You are limited to just one. I could see how they would have some kind of synergy if you had multiples where they're all riposting and healing each other, and I don't know, it'd be a mess. When the monk is in town, he can only meditate to remove stress. He cannot use any other facility. Additionally, I took a peek through some of his trinkets, and some of them are pretty cool, so I wanted to talk about them. One of his uncommon trinkets gives a penalty of 3 speed, but it buffs the amount of healing that Inner Fire gives by 2. So at rank 1 it would heal 2 to 6 instead, making it a much more reliable self-heal. And it boosts the amount of healing from his riposte by 1. So he's going to move slower, and you're probably going to have some trouble going immediately on the first turn before the enemies because of that -3 speed. But if you get that high enough, it's going to significantly increase the amount of healing you're getting out of Inner Fire and the riposte. His very rare trinket, which I actually have right here, the embossed gourd bottle. It makes him heal for 2 additional health on everything. As far as I know, that works on all of his skills, his ripostes, and it's just going to significantly increase the amount of healing. I think that would make him a little competitive with the Vestal, let's say, in healing output. However, it does lower his damage by 15% and his crit by 8%. So he's not going to do a ton of damage, but he is going to put out a lot more healing then. His Crimson Court set Overall, it reduces his healing while buffing up his offensive capabilities. So if you wanted a more damage-oriented monk, maybe you'd use his Crimson Court set. And his Color of Madness trinket does the opposite, buffing his healing while lowering his max health and speed. In conclusion, the monk is a well-designed hybrid character. His healing ability isn't quite on the same level as a Vestal, but he can do it while attacking enemies, which is pretty valuable. Still, his ability to self-heal is a little weak, so I would recommend having a secondary healer like an Arbalest or a Crusader who can put out some extra healing when you need it. Overall, I think the design is coherent and interesting. I like the interactions between his skills and getting crits. I just really enjoyed using him. So thank you to Hellintz for taking the time to bring it to the English-speaking community. English was not his first language, so he came to Reddit asking if people would be interested in an English version of the monk, and he received an outpouring of support, and I think it's well deserved. Itar, guide my path.
Destroyed. A time to perform beyond one's limits.